In today's video, I'm going to discuss the 7 legislative bills before the Nebraska Legislature for the 2023 legislative cycle that, if they're passed, they're going to substantially impact the Nebraska landlord-tenant relationship. So let's get to today's video. All right, so in today's video, I want to discuss 7 legislative bills that are before the Nebraska Legislature. And if these bills pass, many of them are going to substantially impact how you and I do business in Nebraska. Very important issues, and I wanted to make sure you're aware of them before they get too far into the legislative cycle. So let's take a look at these 7 legislative bills. The first one is LB 49. LB 49 was introduced by Senator Dungan, and if LB 49 passes, what it's going to allow the tenant to do is to purchase solar panels and have them installed on your property's roof. So whatever rental property that tenant is renting, they can purchase the solar panels, have them installed, and your consent is not required. They can do it without your consent. Now, certainly if this passes, it's going to open the door for all kinds of unintended consequences. So, for example, what happens if the tenant stops making the payments, or somehow those solar panels are not paid off? Does that create a lien against the property potentially? What happens if during the installation or the removal there's repairs or there's damage to the property? Who is responsible for the repairs? As you can see, when you go down that rabbit hole, there could be a lot of unintended consequences regarding LB 49 if it's passed. LB 169. Now, LB 169 was introduced by Senator Brenda Hunt. Now, if LB 169 passes, to be honest with you, there really is going to be no impact whatsoever. Simply what LB 169 does is creates 2 new protected classes and adding them to the existing protected classes under Nebraska's fair housing laws. Remember, there are federal fair housing laws that have protected classes. There are state fair housing laws that have protected classes, and then local governments can also do the same thing. These 2 protected classes, or the additions thereof, sexual orientation, gender identity, they already are included under the federal protected classes. Even though they're not protected classes on their own, they're a subcategory of the protected class of sex under the federal fair housing law. So currently, if you're a landlord or manager, you have to comply with that anyways. You can't discriminate based on someone's sexual orientation or their gender identity already. So this just codifies it into the state statute. LB 175 was introduced by Senator Dungan. Now, we're calling this the Clean Slate legislative bill. So essentially, here's what it would do. If it passes, a tenant could go into the court and petition the court to strike their eviction records clean after a 3-year period. Again, the tenant would have to go and petition the court. If they did not, then common sense would say that that record would remain on their background check until at some point when they actually go in and petition the court to do it. There could be some unintended consequences to this if it passes. I'm thinking of fair housing in particular. I'm not going to go into details with that, but if LB 175 does pass, I will do a video on some of the things you have to be aware of from a fair housing perspective if it does pass. Again, what it would require the tenant to do is go in front of the court and have the court expunge their record. LB 187 was introduced by Senator Kavanaugh, and I got to be honest with you guys, I think this is probably the one that's going to have the most impact on our community if it's passed. Now, if it's passed, it would give the tenants the right to legal counsel at eviction free of cost. Anytime a tenant shows up, there's a good chance that your eviction is never going to happen on that day for a lot of different reasons. There's a lot of legal maneuvering that an attorney can do to postpone the legal proceeding. So, for example, they could ask for a continuance. They may introduce motions and things like that. So, essentially what this would do is, again, any tenant that's being evicted, they have a right to free legal consultation, be represented by an attorney. That attorney would be provided by the individual county attorney's office where the eviction proceeding is taking place. Now, I think a lot of people are saying or at least they think that this is only going to apply if it's an eviction for, let's say, non-payment of rent, but that's absolutely not the case. Remember, it's for any eviction. That includes a 1430, a 5-day clear and present danger notice eviction. It also includes a 30-day end of tenancy type eviction. So you give a 30-day notice, or your tenant gives a 30-day notice, and that tenant doesn't move, you have to evict them. So this is for any type of eviction. The major concerns with this one is substantially postponing the evictions. Therefore, the tenant's going to remain in that property without paying the rent. The other thing that this is going to do is it's going to cost you more money. Now, it's not specifically addressed in this particular legislative bill, but here's what we've seen happen across the United States that have introduced similar types of legislation. The county imposes some kind of tax or some kind of fee on the landlording community. Typically, they do it by door. So if you own 10 rental units, then, and let's say that they say that it's $100 per door per year, well, that's $1,000 extra per year you're going to have to pay. Some communities have also included not only a per door fee, but they've also included the eviction fee. So it's $100 per door per year, and then there's also a $75 court cost that you have to pay on behalf of the tenant for that eviction proceeding to offset the cost. I don't know how it's going to be structured. If this passes, I will obviously fill you in as this progresses, but this is the one that's going to be substantially impactful, because what I have seen in other jurisdictions that have similar laws, evictions went from 3 to 6 weeks to basically 3 to 6 months because of the legal maneuvering the attorney can do. This is a big deal. And this may be one that if you're in the community, you want to reach out to your state senator. If you're getting any value out of this community, please do me a favor. If you would, please subscribe, hit that red subscribe button, click on the notification bell, and do me a favor. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone that you know in the community, and join our email list. I have a link down below. Stay tuned, or stay informed of what's going on in the community. LB 248. LB 248 was introduced by Senator Vargas. Now, this would add an additional protected class to the Nebraska suite of fair housing laws. Now, in a previous LB, it's LB 169, I discussed that Brenda Hunt introduced LB 169 that basically would include sexual orientation and gender identity. If 248 passes, this would include source of income as a protected class. Now, this also will substantially impact our community. So what it would essentially do is you could not discriminate based on a source of legal income that the tenant is getting, primarily Section 8 vouchers. So if this passes, straight up, you will have to accept Section 8 vouchers. You could not say no any longer. Again, LB 270. LB 270 was introduced by Senator McKinney, and this bill would also substantially impact our community. Now, here's what LB 270 does. The first thing that it does is it actually prohibits landlords and property managers from evicting a tenant for any reason. Non-payment of rent, 5-day clear and present danger notice, violation, whatever, until you prove to the court that you're in full compliance, 100% in compliance with any registration, rental property registration, and inspection ordinance. So for example, in Omaha and Lincoln, I think Bellevue, La Vista, they all have these registration and inspection ordinances. If you're not in 100% compliance, you cannot evict a tenant. The problem is it doesn't define what that means in particular, right? So does that mean you just have to be registered? So what happens if you registered your property, but the inspection hasn't been done? Can you still evict them? What happens if you've registered, but the inspection's been done, but there are some repairs that need to be done, and you're in the process of doing that, and then you're going to have a reinspection? Does that mean you're not in 100% full compliance? Does that mean that the tenant can't be evicted until that is done? We simply don't know. Right now, it's very ambiguous. The one thing I don't like is anything that has ambiguity like that that's going to leave the interpretation up to a judge. And I guarantee at some point there's going to be an attorney, whether it's a tenant attorney or one of these nonprofits, that are going to go to court and try to get the maximum. That means it's registered, that means it's inspected, and all the repairs are done. That's what 100% compliance means. That's the first issue. The second issue is the court's not going to take your word for it that you're in 100% compliance. You're going to have some mechanism to prove that. That mechanism is going to be created by the local jurisdiction that has these ordinances. My guess is it's going to be some type of business license that you get on an annual basis that you have to pay a fee for. And you're going to have to bring this license or this verification that you pay for from the city to court to prove to the judge that you're 100% in compliance so your eviction can go forward. We just don't know how it's going to look in the details, so it's going to substantially impact how we do business. Now, one other impact that this legislative bill is going to have, for those of you that, like, for example, in the city of Omaha, I know many landlords that are intentionally not complying with the rental property inspection ordinance. They're just taking their chances. They're never going to get caught. Or maybe you just legitimately don't know we have one here. Either way, yeah, the birds are going to come home to roost, because at some point you're going to have to do an eviction, and then you're going to have to register your properties. And just a sidebar here, penalties can be pretty stiff for not, you have 30 days to register, for example, in Omaha, all your properties. And if you don't, there's a lot of punitive damages out there that they can assess. All right, the second part of LB 270 is going to be another costly thing here. It would require landlords to replace any lead water lines that may run to your property. We're talking from city connection to your property. Many of the older homes still have lead pipes. You're going to have to replace them. Now, it doesn't say in the bill, in what time frame you have to do it. Essentially, what I'm telling you is if this passes, what you're going to have to do is at some point, there's going to be a deadline. You're going to have to get that property assessed by a licensed plumber to see what kind of line you have. And if it's lead pipes, you're going to have to replace those at your cost. So it's going to be another costly legislative bill in many ways if it passes. LB 545, introduced by Senator Conrad, makes a minor change to a statute that's going to potentially have a big impact. So currently, when the court grants a writ of restitution, it must be completed not more than 10 days. Somewhere between day 1 and 10, that writ of restitution has to be completed. Well, the law is going to be amended if LB 545 passes, that changes it to not less than 10 days. So that means that will give that tenant who's just been evicted a full 10 days at a minimum. Potentially more. I can see a lot of scenarios where it could actually end up being more than that, depending on how the processes are in individual counties. So, small change to a current statute that can have a big impact on our community. If you would like to learn more about each one of these specific legislative bills, I'm going to put a link down below to each one of these bills to the PDF so you can download it and read it in its totality for yourself. Don't forget, if there's one of these that you support or you don't like, please opine with your state senator. It's all I got, everybody. I'll see you in the next video.